Okay, another question. The county budget report to the Board of Education indicated that Howard County is in better shape than any other county in Maryland. At the same time, the Department of Education indicated that there is an estimated 12,000 additional students expected in the next 10 years. Talk about how the county executive will support the needed capital budget.
That last sentence of the question? Talk about
how the county executive, or whichever one of you decide, will support the needed capital budget.
The needed capital budget?
To make up for the extra 12,000.
I mean, this is not a new quandary in Howard County. We are the victim of our own success, and we attract people here because of our schools. So we are going to have more students, but the rate of growth has slowed, and we are still growing. We are definitely not in a place where anybody could say we're out of the business of building elementary schools, like it said to me in 1996. We will still need to build schools. And it was just not so long ago when we had about 49,000 students. Now we have 51,000. So we will continue to grow, and we need to continue to monitor where our schools need to be built. I think that it is important that we review our adequate public facilities ordinance and see how we are contributing in terms of building the requirement when new buildings kick in. In my time on the county council, we've built 1,300 new homes a year on average. When my opponent was on the council, his county council, it was 1,800 homes a year. I'm not saying he's responsible for the 1,800 homes. What I'm saying is during that period of time in the county, the growth was a lot more than in the last 8 years. And so the question is, are the students coming still from new home development or from resales? And I believe that they are coming more from resales now than they were before. And I think that that is something that needs to be reflected in the adequate public facilities ordinance, which is not reflected now. And that's why it's important to convene a group to review the ACFO, as I served on that committee many years ago, to make sure that we are including the resale impact on our schools, our resale homes, and new students generated.
Thank you. Thank you. I agree that ACFO is one way to look at this, and one way we should do that. And I agree with Councilman Watson. We should have everything on the table, including the resale, so to find out what's the best way we can make sure that we have the infrastructure we need for these 12,000 more students who are coming. This also goes back to the prevailing wage vote. We're going to build new schools. We're going to renovate schools. And I just want to make you know, I understand that there's construction costs included more than just labor. But I want to make sure that you understood that the 10% increase was the total cost of a new school, the total cost of a new project. It's not just 10% of labor. It was 10% of the total cost is what the school system is saying we're going to have to pay now. So as we have these 12,000 more students coming, we're going to have to figure out the best way we can deal with that. We're going to figure out the best way we can find new school sites and deal with renovating existing schools to make sure we can make that happen. I know one of the other concerns we have is the way in which the capacity of our schools are determined. I know there are a lot of folks who are very concerned that the school system has seemed to increase the capacity without actually doing any changes inside the schools themselves. And that's something we need to talk about as well. But the biggest issue is we've got to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place. APFO is a good way to look at that. But we also have to make sure that we look for sites and we look for places in which we can provide those new schools.
I think that the other thing we're going to have to do as we face increasing costs is, and I think this is important, is to look at new school construction as broadly as we can for solutions. So, does it make sense to have public-private partnerships in the building of a new school? Does it have sense to be leasing a school building instead of the county always funding it 100% through 30-year bonds? I think that we need to look at school construction in a much broader way to make sure that we are using our dollars as well as possible as we meet the needs of our students and our school system going forward. Thank you.
Southeastern Howard County has some of the highest levels of schools of capacity, using hundreds of modular classrooms. With Route 1 revitalization, smart growth initiatives, TOD, and infill adding density to our shared school system, are we going to make any other policy adjustments in your term other than ACFO?
Who responded first to the last question? Was it you?
I think it's my turn. I will say, I know Vince said, other than that, though, that certainly is a big place to go to, because that's what determines whether or not a school is open or not, is to figure out the best way to deal with that. I think one thing we also have to look at is how we've done our zoning on Route 1. We want to revitalize, we have to be very careful about taking away some commercial zoning and making it residential. That increases the concern about overcrowding. I think we need to do the best we can to provide for the commercial zoning so that we can grow our commercial tax base to make sure that we have less and less pressure onto our property taxes. Commercial tax base is only 16.5% right now in Howard County. Back when, in the early 1990s, when Chuck Ecker was county executive, it was 22%. We need to figure out ways in which we can do that. And so we look at the southeast corridor. I think we need to figure out ways in which we can encourage economic growth there. I know that the county's done some things on that. I applaud them on trying to increase that economic growth. I don't applaud them on taking away some of that commercial property and making it residential. I think that's a problem. We need to make sure that we expand that commercial tax base so that the pressure, as I said, will not be on our property tax being increased. I think it's a real concern in the future, and one that I would try to make happen throughout Howard County, but also in the southeast corridor.
Yes, the school system is using 247 portable classrooms right now, and about half of them are at schools where the schools are not over capacity. So about 120 or 30 are at schools that are over capacity, and unfortunately several in the southeast. As I've talked with parents throughout this campaign in the southeast, it strikes me that they need to have a voice. And they remind me of myself and my neighbors and friends back in the Northeast 10 or 15 years ago. And one of the things I would like to do after I'm elected is to convene those parents, have those parents come in and talk with me directly about how we can resolve the problems in the southeast and make sure that they have all of the information and all of the tools at their fingertips. Make sure that the Board of Education is paying attention to their concerns. I know that the Board of Education is attempting to find another site for an elementary school in the southeast, but I somehow feel that there's a disconnect between the residents in the southeast and the school system, and I would like to help bridge that gap.
Thank you. Next question.
As county executive, what would you do to make the older schools and neighborhoods lacking sidewalks safer for children who walk to school?
We work on this problem all the time in my district in Ellicott City and Elkridge, and we do have older neighborhoods that were not built with sidewalks. A good example is Dunlawton. And I was very pleased to be working with my special assistant who's in the audience today, the wonderful and great Terry Chaconis, with the Dunlawton neighborhood to create a sidewalk and a pathway through that neighborhood to connect directly to Northfield and Dunlawton Elementary School. Northfield Elementary School and Dunlawton Middle School. We just opened that pathway a few weeks ago, and now the kids can walk directly through the woods on a nice pathway rather than have to go around the area where there is traffic. We need to make sure that we are retrofitting safe walking environments in our older neighborhoods when and where we can. And it's a tough problem because you have to get easements from private property owners in order to make it work. But that is a successful example of something that I did in my district that I would like to see us do throughout the county.
I certainly agree with what Councilman Watson said. We need to look at that. We need to figure out the best ways we can make it happen. We need to make sure we include the community. And this is another good example of how you need to make sure everybody is included. Everybody in the community is included so that you bring the school system, but you also bring the residents and the parents to make sure that everybody has a seat at the table. If everybody has a seat at the table, you're going to find a better way to come to a solution. And so I think that the older schools and the walking, we need to figure out the best way we can make sure that their safety is paramount. We need to make sure that the safety of our kids is the most important concern we have when they're going to school, especially if they're walking. And so I will do whatever I can to make sure we can make that happen. And the biggest point is to make sure that the residents feel like they have a say in it and participate.
Next question. The Board of Education recently suspended the Operating Budget Review Committee, of which I sat on, and was not personally happy about it. What do you think about this decision?
I'm concerned about the decision as well, and I've talked to members of that committee, and I believe that I've also talked to members of the school board about this, and I understand some of the concerns they have, But it seems to me those concerns could be addressed while the committee is still meeting. I don't believe that that sends a good message to our citizens to say that we're going to stop having a committee because certain people think it's not working as well as it should be. I think instead you continue to have that committee work. You can still, as it's meeting and looking at the budget, you can still have ways in which you can try to reform it. But to tell somebody we're not going to meet anymore, I think sends the wrong message. And I also think that it's important that our citizens feel that they have a say in the process. And this was the way in which our citizens would have a say in the budget process for the school system. I know there's also concerns from people I've talked to who served on that committee that they weren't getting the information that they had requested. And I think it's important that the Board of Education, as well as the county when we're doing our budget, make sure that citizens have access to this information. And these are citizens that we have asked to serve on a committee to help review the budget, to make sure that things are going the way it should be, to be a check and balance, if you like. And I believe that we need to continue that. And I think that it sent the wrong message by terminating the committee.
Yes, and so, I think I'm going to have to go in about 2 more questions, so I just want to make sure that you're aware that, and the audience is aware that I have to leave I'm supposed to leave at 7, but I'm trying to get as many questions in as possible. We have another event to go to. On the Operating Budget Review Committee, I actually was the board member along with Josh Kaufman that started that committee. We gave, as board members, we set up that committee, we made sure that it had a charter, we made sure that it had rules of the road, and it operated very well for many years. I'm not sure how it has operated lately, but I do think it's important, and the whole idea was to bring transparency and input into the budgeting process, because the operating budget is a very large document for the average person to understand. But the committee, we brought in different department heads, we brought in the budget director to enable them to help us make recommendations on the spending of the money in the school system. So I support it. I was one of the founding members of it.
You support the suspension or?
No, I support the Operating Budget Review Committee working. I helped found it, and I would like to see it, the school system reinstituted.
The Howard County Public School System currently does not own their own bus fleet. Would you support and fund the purchase of buses and employ the necessary staff so that the school system would not have to rely on outside contractors?
The total change from using independent contractors to using your own buses with your own employees is vastly expensive. And so what I would want to do as county executive is A, get the recommendation from the Board of Education, but B, find out what are the problems that our existing service is causing, if any, and what is the problem we're trying to solve. And then, of course, look at the cost, the overall cost, and the benefits of doing so, and the downsides of doing so. So without more information, it's a little bit hard to answer that question, but particularly I'd like to know what are the problems that the independent use of drivers is causing us.
And I agree with Ms. Watson on this one as well. I know it would be more expensive to have an in-house. There's no question about that. I guess I'd like to find out, is there issues beyond cost here? I mean, is there issues with the independent contractors not doing a good job? And I think we need to bring people together to find that out. So I think we would have to have a Board of Education, have a school system, the transportation office provide that information. Again, this goes to the point where you can have a stat system there. You can have performance measures for the independent contractors. Are they meeting those measures? Are they fulfilling what they're supposed to be doing? And I don't mean just by getting someone there in school on time, but also in the quality of their performance. I think that's certainly something we have to look at. So I don't know the concerns right now. I'd like to find those out. I do know some independent bus contractors, and I know they do a very good job, and they work very hard. And I strongly believe in a private system if it can work, and if it does the job. I think it's going to be a good way to keep it, but nobody's looking